Howdy! Welcome to part 2 of the Dragon Age Iceberg, where we'll be going through levels 4 through 8. Enjoy! Level 4, Center of the Iceberg, 29. Andraste is Flemeth. One theory suggests that Andraste is Flemeth, which is bolstered by various findings, both large and small. 1. Remembering that a book in Orzammar claimed that Andraste was simply a powerful mage rather than a true prophet could link to Flemeth herself being a powerful mage with the backing of a potential demon, having brokered the deal after fleeing from a man named Lord Conabar. 2. Flemeth's trademark is being able to shapeshift into a high dragon, both in Dragon Age 1 and 2. Meanwhile, the cult of Andraste also revered a high dragon. An odd coincidence. Perhaps the founder of the cult saw Flemeth shapeshifting, giving the illusion of Andraste being reborn, and just assumed the two were one and the same. 3. Both Dragon Age 1 and 2 featured Flemeth wearing garments very similar to Tevinter mage robes. Specifically, note the garment with the black, furry or feathery shoulder pads. Andraste is a slave who escaped from Tevinter. 30. Andraste was an elf. Some believe Andraste was an elf due to her potential connection to the elven gods, the fact that her ears are never shown in artwork, again hidden behind her hair, and the fact that Tevinter had a myriad of elven slaves. And Andraste was known as a slave of Tevinter. If true, Andraste could have hidden her identity as an elf in order to unite the human factions to rise up, knowing they would not heed the guidance from an elf. Additionally, the turmoil that would ensue if Andraste were revealed to be an elf would no doubt lead to infighting or a refusal of the predominant religious beliefs of Thedas. Given how elves are treated like second-class citizens or outcasts, would the humans continue to follow a figure they may outwardly or subconsciously feel as being beneath them? 31. Modern elves are descended from spirits who created bodies for themselves or were made corporeal by crossing from the Fade into the physical world. Let's take Cole, for example. While Cole is human in his presentation, this could be due to the fact of the host body he utilized when traversing into the current plane of existence. Given the theories of Solus being a spirit of wisdom that took physical form, and his unbounding support for and help of Cole in guiding his spirit, it could stand to reason that they are connected in a way. Here are some interactions between the pair. Cole: it's brighter here. Glittering, glaring, glinting. I can't. Solus: it's a mild tremor in the veil. Nothing to worry about. Focus on what is here in this world. Cole: but what is here? Solus: feel the ground, the breath in your lungs, fabric rustling against your skin. Cole: thank you. Solus: it's nothing. It can be overwhelming for anyone. Later on, Cole: you don't need to envy me, Solus. You can find happiness in your own way. Solus: I apologize for disturbing you, Cole. I am not a spirit, and sometimes it is hard to remember such simple truths. Solus sounds almost wistful in his deliverance of these lines, lamenting perhaps a time long since past. Why would it be hard for Solus to remember that some things do not apply to him, unless they once did, and he must now make the distinction from what he was versus what he now is? Still, regardless of Solus being someone that traverses the Fade regularly, he seems to know quite a bit about how Cole is feeling. Cole: you're different, Solus. Sharper. You're in both places. Solus: I visit the Fade regularly. Perhaps you are sensing traces of it. You are a spirit who crossed the veil and took human form. It is also interesting how he notes that Cole took human form because it was what was available to him. Had he wanted to come over without such a vessel, what would he have looked like? According to Solus, ancient elves were, quote, beings who live forever for whom magic was as natural as breathing. Other than the magical denizens of the Vale, such as the spirits, who else does that leave? In addition to Cole and Solus's interaction, Solus has noted and tried to reach out to Sarah, who seems to have a latent magical talent and can see the green tear of the veil in the sky. Of course, Sarah is an elf, but inherent magical powers are not exclusive to elves. Could all magic users be descended from elves or spirits? 32. Arlathan is the Golden Black City. The Inquisitor comments that when the veil is taken down, the Evanurus will be free, which Solus confirms. How fitting would it be that Solus imprisons the Evanurus within their own city, the very seat of their power, locking them in the blight they found within the Fade. 33. Dwarves used to be a hive mind. In the Descent DLC, when Dagna has her lyrium vision, she felt like she was, quote, mountain tall, end quote, and her thoughts were all of the thoughts of her people. Add to this that this is where we learn that Bianca found out that lyrium is alive, and that lyrium is something like the blood or the nervous system of the Titans. According to the gang Shade, the dwarves seem to have a seemingly symbiotic relationship with the Titan or Titans, or the stone in this case, that allows them to enter this hive mind to communicate with the Titan or mountain they find themselves within. The Shade claims, quote, the stone has a will that surrounds and directs. She guides even when we are willfully blind to her influence. But she is not pure. The stone bears a corruption as old as balance. For the dwarves to prosper, the gang, the waste and unstable rock must be cut away. But like the stone, the gang also has an influence. Each of us must face this, must carve the worst of ourselves away. But the Legion of the Dead bears a unique responsibility. Only the fully adorned of the Legion can face the gang, can cut into the darkness that afflicts the raw stone. She encircles us, and we must protect her, here where darkness meets light, end quote. So with the Titans dead, and the dwarves thus undirected, according to Solus, they are thus unable to access the hive mind without ingesting this lyrium. However, those dwarves that have continued to imbibe the raw lyrium over a greater period of time are shown to have gone mad due to the supposed song. Is this the song of the dead or slumbering Titan, or is there otherwise a rush of all their kin's thoughts, with the listener now unable to separate their singular personhood from the rest? And what would happen to the rest of their society if they were to regain this link? 34. Gillenon made the Canary. In the Temple of Mythal, the Codex entry for Gillenon states she created monsters of various kinds that were hunted by Andruil. However, she was offered godhood in exchange for destroying them. This implies some level of genetic engineering or perhaps selective breeding. Additionally, Kieran, when hosting the old god spirit, remarks to a Canary Inquisitor that, I noticed your blood. It doesn't belong to your people. What does he mean by doesn't belong to your people? Could it not signify that it is unnatural and created? We later learn that the ancient elves supposedly destroyed themselves from infighting. So what if, instead of destroying her creations, she continued to cultivate them, turning them into her own army against her brethren? Each generation featured more experimentation and dragon blood, making them similar to Reavers with their powers, essentially creating the Kossith, which are incredibly similar to the Canary, and many believe the two races to be the same, either branching away due to personal code or time. With the sealing of the elven pantheon, they were then free and left to their own devices. However, as Iron Bull notes, they go crazy with anger and violent madness if not directed by the Qun. After all, if they were bred to fulfill a purpose, to fight relentlessly, how could they exist and come to terms with their very genetic makeup and inclinations? 35. Teventers made the Qunari. One theory suggests that the Qunari are a genetic experiment concocted by Teventer using elven slaves and dragon blood. Again, this would explain the uncontrollable temper before the Qun because of the irrationality of raw dragon power and the Qunari's centuries-long hatred of Teventer. Teventer's obsession with dragons and the availability of elven slaves makes it probable that they attempted to find a way to become more dragon-like, but tried their theories and rituals on disposable subjects first. 36. Sarah is Andruil. As discussed by Shaylin Ispan on Tumblr, various people in the community believe that Sarah is the vessel for Andruil. Her research is thorough and is presented as thus. Sarah is not Andruil in the same way Solus is Fen Harel. Instead, Sarah is not Andruil in the same way Solus is Fen Harel. Instead, Sarah could be the vessel of Andruil the way Flemeth is for Mythal, i.e. when Flemeth says, "She came to me, a wisp of an ancient being." Sarah most likely does not know what is going on. She seems to be hiding from memories, wants to ask Leliana about her prescient visions, which is found written in a book near her door. In her romance path, she fears that the dreams she sees could be real, and is antagonistic toward the elven gods. At times, she seems to want the Inquisitor to reassure her that the elven gods aren't real. Again, her reaction after returning from the Well of Sorrows is more on her extreme feelings for Mythal in that moment. Cole tells Sarah, "There are songs in every part of you, waiting for you to hear them," as well as, "The sky wants to say something, it's trying." Plus, Sarah experiences déjà vu, Cole says it's memories slipping to her across the veil, and hears whispers that other elves do not. This sounds fairly similar to the mostly unintelligible whispers the Inquisitor hears as she drinks from the well. Flemeth has accepted and integrated Mythal, as she says, "She is a part of me, no more separate than your heart from your chest." So, she can fully understand the knowledge, memories, and power that comes from Mythal. But Sarah might be scared and angry because she's trying to suppress or avoid these feelings, and the wisp is probably still too weak to manifest more strongly. Now, if Sarah contains the wisp of an ancient elven god, then why is she so hateful toward elfy elves? And here, elfy is an important distinction because Sarah seems to judge people for how they act and not simply what they are. There are a few possibilities. If Sarah is getting memories from Andruil's wisp, she could be reacting to Andruil owning slaves and the slaves' horrible treatment at the hands of their elven masters in general. She could have some understanding of the truth about ancient elves and the atrocities committed by the gods, so she'd be angry at anyone who worshipped and glorified them. On top of this, she can't even explain it to anyone because she'd have to reveal and admit to herself what was inside her. Lastly, her rage against elfy elves could be so extreme because of self-hate and guilt if the wisp inside of her embodies everything she thinks is wrong with the world. Quote, "Yet even a god should not linger here, and each time she enters the void, Andruil suffered longer and longer periods of madness after returning. But Mythal's magic sapped Andruil's strength, and stole her knowledge of how to find the void. After this, the great hunter could never make her way back to the abyss, and peace returned. This could explain why Sarah doesn't know what she is, where she came from, and her apparent loss of memory. She remembers being a child in the alienage, but says she doesn't remember her parents and doesn't care to remember where she was born. Quote, "One day Andrul grew tired of hunting mortal men and beasts. She began stalking the Forgotten Ones, wicked things that thrive in the abyss. Mythal spread rumors of a monstrous creature and took the form of a great serpent, waiting for Andrul at the base of a mountain. The Forgotten Ones may be dragons or, like Flemeth, take dragon form. The evidence for this is a little shaky, but there is more ancient elven text that suggests the greater gods and their chosen could. Quote, "His crime is high treason. He took on a form reserved for the gods and their chosen, and dared to fly in the shape of the divine. The sinner belongs to Dirthamen. He claims he took wings at the urging of Gilanan and begs protection from Mythal. She does not show him favor and will let Elargnan judge him. For a moment there is an image of a shifting, shadowy mass with blazing eyes, from whose form may be one or many, then it fades. If this is true, it could explain why the game goes to lengths to show how much Sarah enjoys hunting dragons, from her dialogue when you encounter dragons to war table notes, and this from her completed codex entry. Addendum. On Sarah's fascination with dragons, I do not know what Sarah finds in dragons that enthralls her so, but it is clear from her excited admissions that battling them speaks to her in a way for which she was not prepared, at least in my estimation. If you seek an admission, at best she will declare, "That was grand," or similar. She's hardly introspective. Nevertheless, she has expressed an interest in any future hunts. A crude drawing of Sarah, tongue out, standing atop a dragon, mimicking its horns with her fingers. In addition to this, when you take Sarah to the Fade and go to the arena with the gravestones, Sarah specifically says that her greatest fear is the nothing, which is strange unless you consider that the nothing could be another way to describe the void. Before we leave this codex behind, take one last look at the overall story of Mythal luring Andrul into an ambush and their fight that ends in Mythal stealing her strength and knowledge. In her companion quest, Sarah is lured into an ambush by a nobleman, and, if certain options are chosen, she goes out of her mind with rage and wrecks him. Her reaction was unnervingly brutal and felt extreme even in those circumstances. But it could have been an echo of Andrul's rage in the same way that Flemeth is still angry and wants revenge for being betrayed personally and for Mythal being betrayed in the past. Another quote from Cole reinforces the idea that Sarah is a vessel for something. Quote, "Fleet-footed and free, the arrow that caught the miller's sack, but no longer shot alone. A quiver is a quiver." The quiver in a quiver part may be significant if both Andrul and Sarah are empty of most of their significant memories. Essentially a hollow container within another hollow container. And the arrow caught in the sack represents Andrul's purpose. If the arrow was meant to pierce the sack to tear a hole, open the floodgates, and allow grain to flow out, then being stuck in the sack shows that something went wrong and Andrul's purpose was thwarted. Grain and arrows also comes up in the writing in which Andrul gathers grains of light into an arrow that seems meant for some terrible use in the future. Quote, "She shook the radiance of the stars, divided them into grains of light, then stored them in a shaft of gold. Andrul, blood and force, save us from the time this weapon is thrown. Your people pray to you. Spare us the moment we become your sacrifice." Cole also says the following, which might tie into her purpose. "She hurts, but helping hurts more. She sees the strings that pull me. eyes like raisins in a stale cookie. How would Sarah see the strings that pull coal? I don't think she is hiding being a mage, but the part of Sarah that is Andruil may be capable of it. Sarah seems to be resisting Andruil's wisp and gets vague feelings, messages, power from it that she doesn't quite understand and possibly even tries to suppress. Whispers, dreams, natural ability with a bow, etc. Look at Sarah's involvement with the Friends of Red Jenny. Andruil's way of the three trees. Be swift and silent, bend but don't break, be stronger together, mindful of the gifts of the hunt. And the story of Andruil and Ghilan'nan. The way of the three trees might as well be the motto of the Friends of Red Jenny, and the story of Ghilan'nan is a perfect illustration of how the Friends of Red Jenny actually operates. Quote, "And Ghilan'nan prayed to the gods for help. She prayed to Elgar'nan for vengeance, the mother Mythal to protect her, but above all she prayed to Andruil. Andruil sent her hares to Ghilan'nan, and they chewed through the ropes that bound her. But Ghilan'nan was not wounded and blind, and could not find her way home. So Andruil turned her into a beautiful white deer, the first Hala, and Ghilan'nan found her way back to her sisters, and led them to the hunter, who was brought to justice. Ghilan'nan, a friend, calls to Andruil, Red Jenny, for help, who sends hares, the little people, that chew through her bonds to set her free, little people acting within their limited power to help the Friends of Red Jenny as a whole, which eventually leads to the target being brought to justice in some way. The Friends will harass nobles, steal, upset plans, even kill those they think deserve it. If Sarah felt echoes from Andruil's wisp inside of her, she might have felt compelled to act in certain ways, and joining the Red Jennies is like following a skewed version of Andruil's Way of the Three Trees. Now, let's see how Sarah's tarot card, the Grains of Light text, and Andruil's Valisline come together with surprising clarity. We can usually only guess at what Vaseline goes with which elven god, but Andruil's is pretty obvious considering it's a bow and arrow. Now flip the Vaseline upside down and you get the layout of Sarah's second tarot card. Her bow, arrow, head, shoulder and chest, armor, legs, gap between thighs, and even the shape of her hair and pointed finger are all represented. Now compare Sarah's card to the text from earlier. Whole stars appear at the top of the card, and streaks of light clearly center on a glowing arrow with a pale golden shaft. The stars, grains of light, glowing spear, a projectile just like an arrow, and Andruil's Valisline are so clearly depicted in Sarah's very deliberate pose on her tarot card that it's hard to believe this was anything but intentional. 37. Shartan was an agent of Fen'Harel. Another theory makes the supposition that Shartan was not Solas or Fen'Harel, but merely an agent of him. Again, this would help to explain why his spirit can be found and spoken to in the games, as he is a wholly separate entity to Solas. 38. Sandal is June. Sandal is shown or referenced as having considerable magic abilities, crafting runes and using enchantments most of the time. Similar to Flemeth, there are those that believe Sandal is a vessel for an elven god, June, the god of craft or crafting. After all, Sandal crafts runes and materials and has uttered seemingly omniscient prophecies about the future, not unlike Kieran, who is also the host to another spirit, lending credence to him being able to access or otherwise embody such a powerful spirit. 39. Every Valisline used to be made with lyrium. Valisline are sometimes referred to as blood writing, and the intricate facial patterns are carved into the elves' heads. It is believed that ancient elves' Valisline were true blood writing, in which lyrium, the blood of the Titans, was utilized in the carving process. Did the lyrium have any adverse effects on the elves, for which the markings denoted their status as slaves? Did it enhance their capabilities and powers for their masters, or something else? When dwarves imbibe lyrium, they may access the latent hive mind, but could this have been a gateway for the Evanurus to hear their slaves' thoughts, quashing any potential uprisings? Regarding some lines from Cole suggests that, perhaps, elves were created by the Evanurus, quote, making bodies out of the ground, thus binding spirits to them through the Valisline. Solus was a wisdom spirit that was bound to a body and marked by Mythal, and it was through removing the Valisline and freeing the other slaves that he truly came into his own free self. 40. The Maker was a regular spirit. The Maker was just a spirit that visited Andraste, perhaps a spirit of faith from how much Andraste prayed to the gods. The spirit of faith eventually entered Andraste, which explains her becoming an abomination and why people reported her having a lost gaze, where she states that she was receiving a vision. Quote, she also was known to display strange behavior, such as becoming still for long moments in a trance-like state, after which she would report voices as if from a lost memory and talk of strange auras or the sound of bells. End quote. Anders was fully taken over by the spirit of justice at times, but could not a potential spirit of faith been more subtle? This also explains why her remains have magical properties that can heal, because spirit mages call forth their magic from beyond the veil, gaining help from spirits to heal. These benign spirits of fortitude, compassion, hope, and the like rarely seek to cross the veil, but can sometimes be persuaded to protect and restore life, rather than corrupt or destroy it as demons would. In effect, spirit healers summon a benevolent spirit through the veil, and that spirit uses its abilities on the mage's behalf. 41. Dragon Age 2's lackluster or weird aspects are because Varric is lazy or a liar. When remembering Dragon Ages 2 and story and implications, one must also remember that Varric is the one recounting it to Cassandra. How much did Varric know, or was he simply filling in the gaps from what he did or didn't know, or otherwise curating the story in favor of his friend, the hero of Kirkwall? Level 5, Lower Half. 42. Andraste was Flemeth's ancestor. It is noted by Morrigan's discovery that Flemeth has a long history of daughters, with her grimoire indicating that as Flemeth gets older, she raises a daughter, only to take over her body when her current body would die. According to a codex on Andraste, she had a daughter who only conceived daughters, and they themselves only had daughters, and so on. Could this be a part of that cycle? No sons are ever mentioned. As for Morrigan, could Kieran simply be the result of having an old god or tainted blood being the stop of this cycle? Or a much less accepted theory, could Kieran actually be a female that Morrigan disguises as a male in the vain hopes of keeping her mother away from a potentially new vessel? 43. Sandal is the Maker. One theory suggests that Sandal is, in fact, the Maker. The reason that Sandal's speech patterns present as simple, save for when he uttered the prophecy, is because his mortal form is wholly incapable of containing the sheer knowledge or veritable omniscience of such a being. On one hand, does Sandal have inherent access to this hive mind of the dwarves? And is it too overwhelming for a mortal vessel to comprehend? Or is his personality and characteristics a ruse that can be dropped at will, all in an attempt to observe the key players of the world, such as the Warden or Hawk? 44. Thetis has 2 moons, but only one can be visible at a time. The Dragon Age lore states that the planet on which Thetis is located has 2 moons, but 2 moons are never seen at the same time in any of the games. This had led some to believe that BioWare simply forgot about the lore. One is rotating at the same time or same rate as the world in which Thetis resides, or it is hidden in orbit behind the other. 45. Leliana is Andraste's descendant. Similar to Flemeth being Andraste's descendant, many believe Leliana to be this person. Not only is she devout and dedicated to religious teachings, she's a woman, which fits the daughter statement. She gets a prophecy from the Maker. She is revived in the Temple of Sacred Ashes, assuming the warden kills her in Origins. She is also able to be made divine, and if she was resurrected, makes reference to the fact that the divine may have brought her back for this. 46. Helisaer was the original Old God baby. Helisaer was Andraste's half-sister, and it is believed that she was the original Old God baby of Dumat. Dumat's soul jumped into Andraste after her sister died, being a willing vessel. Helisaer's mother, the unnamed alchemy advisor, would fit as being more likely to have performed the dark ritual than Andraste's mother, Brona. The alchemist allegedly had ties to the old gods, and she was cast out or killed, or maybe disappeared herself soon after. 47. Avenurus created the Darkspawn. The trapped elven pantheon created the Darkspawn, allowing the Magister Sidereal to become infected and thus release the blight upon the land, as we see Corypheus, one of the original Magisters, summarily tainted. Turning these Magisters into the Darkspawn and unleashing them on Thetis would be the perfect way to enact revenge on the Tevinter Imperium and all the races of Thetis that had taken over since the collapse of the Elven Empire. Could the Darkspawn have discovered the old gods or dragons, turning them into archdemons and thus using them to wreak havoc? 48. Dragon Age and Mass Effect are in the same universe. Some fans believe that the Dragon Age and Mass Effect universes are one and the same. Some claim that, on Eden Prime, when a scientist exclaims, "Thank the Maker," he is referencing the religion in Dragon Age. Additionally, various Easter eggs, which are most likely the result of having the same parent company, have drawn similar connections, such as a Krogan head in the Winter Palace or an ogre statue in Mass Effect. One theory suggests that Thetis is on one of the two purported moons somewhere in the Milky Way galaxy, and Krogans tried to explore the moon but were killed, the locals thinking them being a different form of demon. The hive mind or Fade essentially became the realm of the Reapers, in which all consciousnesses or spirits became a part. 49. Leliana is a Fade spirit. If you kill Leliana in Origins, she is supposedly revived in the Temple of Sacred Ashes, but many believe that she came back as a lyrium ghost, or a spirit like Cole. At the end of the Trespasser DLC, she becomes isolated and then she just vanishes. 50. The Maker was a demon. A theory laid out by an unfortunately since deleted Redditor summarizes why the Maker was a demon, and it reads as thus. The Maker wasn't actually a god, but the greatest demonic threat to Thetis ever, being the primordial demon of the Fade, and the old gods were his servants in the physical world, his own seven-headed dragon, and the Forgotten Ones were malevolent demons enthralled to it in the Fade. The only races old and powerful enough to contain the threat would have been the dwarves and elves, the dwarves who were once capable of magic, and the elves immortal and powerful. Maybe together they created the Black City to imprison it as its own personal hell and imprison the old gods beneath the earth. The primeval Tig and its corruption was the sort of thing the Maker just did, before the creation of the Veil when magic was abundant and everyone could use it. When the Maker was free, it wandered the earth, and through its powers and influence it corrupted the original and most powerful dwarven Tig. Through their combined magic, ingenuity, and blood magic, it warped and corrupted the lyrium and created red lyrium, and subsequently the red lyrium idol. This prompted the war upon it and the corrupted dwarves by both the elves and other uncorrupted dwarves, and resulted in the utter destruction of that Tig and the creation of the Veil and the Black City and the loss of the elven gods, who sought power in order to defeat it at any cost. The dwarves might have even once worshipped the elven gods too, but were so ashamed of what their own corrupted kinsmen had done that they struck their religion and memory of the primeval Tig off their records, even going so far as to sever their own collective connection to the Fade and reject worship of any gods that might tempt or corrupt them, trusting in their race and the earth. The elven deities were powerful, benevolent spirits of the Fade that worked with the elves and dwarves to help bind the Maker, and his demonic lieutenants, the Forgotten Ones, in the spirit realm, sacrificing themselves in the process and trapping them in the Black City. All except Fen'Harel, who was still at work in the world as well as Flemeth, and who seems to have played a pivotal part in trapping all the gods and demons in the Black City. Flemeth certainly fits the part of a trickster god and lone wolf, and seems to have a vested interest in keeping blights contained, and an innate hatred of the Chantry and its worshippers. Working to keep the Maker and the other gods imprisoned in the Black City after she betrayed them seems very much in her interests and would explain her role in the games. Perhaps it was even her words in Maferath's ears that doomed Andraste. However, along came ignorant humans, who stumble on the old gods and start worshipping them, and they convince the humans to try to enter the Black City to free their master, which is made more appealing by the fact that the Maker has somehow created the illusion that the Black City is golden. This backfires, of course, dramatically, as the Maker's own evil forever taints them, and the magic defenses of the Black City automatically cast them out, leaving the Maker still trapped. This then drives them to seek out and free the old gods as vengeance for deceiving them and failing to release the Maker, yet also serves as a tool of vengeance on the mortal races. Upon the failure of the old gods to free the Maker, the cult of the Chantry was created by it, because the presence of the Black City had been sufficiently weakened by the break-in by the Tevinter Magisters, to allow the Maker to reach out into the mind of a certain Andraste and plant the seeds of his worship again, with their belief slowly strengthening the Maker, so that it might one day break free. This almighty tear in the veil that has been seen in Inquisition is the Maker's latest attempt at freedom as the prison has weakened further. The lyrium idol that sparked all of the latest troubles was also his doing and a conduit for his influence in the mortal realm. The original war against the Maker would have taken place in the year 4600 Ancient and 3100 Ancient, that is to say after contact was made between the elves and dwarves, but before the humans arrived in Thedas. 51. Solus is the Maker. In the Chant of Light, Threnodies 5 begins with a verse that is entitled, "The Maker creates the Fade and the spirits." Could this literally mean putting a veil between them and the world, or, like it says, creating the Fade that supposedly Solus has done? The first children of the Maker are called spirits. Assumedly, this refers to the Fade spirits who in the beginning of the canticle appear to exist in the real world. Later, the Maker becomes disillusioned with the spirits and knows he has wrought amiss, or that the world is amiss, and in verse 4 entitled, "The Fade is separated from the world," the Maker took from the Fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, "Here I decree opposition in all things." Sounds like this was the Maker creating the veil. However, we know that Solus created the veil. Are they one and the same? If Solus could create the veil, could he not also create the Golden City with his incredible powers? Verse 6 of the canticle reads, "And then the Maker sealed the gates of the Golden City, and there he dwelled waiting to see the wonders his children would create." Could the timeline we know be wrong or a red herring? We know Solus went into a slumber after creating the veil, so could he have fallen asleep, assuming he'd created something beneficial and was eager to see what the new world without the Evanuris would look like? Verse 7, "And the old gods rise." The beginning of this verse speaks of the Fade spirits and their jealousy of the human world and their desire to rule over it. The verses read, the demons appeared to the children of earth in dreams, and named themselves gods, demanding fealty. While this could be a reference to the Evanurus attempting to communicate with the Magisters in order to try and get free, could it be something else? And the Canticle of Silence. First among the old gods was silence. As mentioned earlier, Dumat is the god of silence, and Durthamen, god of secrets and knowledge, are two that seem to match this. So bear that in mind in the following. The high priest, conductor of the choir of silence, ruled above all the dreamers of the Imperium, wisest and most powerful of the Magisters Sidereal. In his dreams he alone heard the voice of silence. Open the gates. To my golden city you must sojourn. At the foot of my throne I shall anoint you, most favored of my disciples, and I shall raise you up to godhood. That sounds like an offer of power. And we know the Magisters break into the golden city and everything goes awry, but the Maker tells the Magisters in verse 6 of Silence 3, the old gods will call to you, from their ancient prisons they will sing. Dragons with wicked eyes and wicked hearts, on blackened wings does deceit take flight. Thus, it could be Solus warning the Magisters about the Evanurus because he has imprisoned them, and, as we know from his trespasser dialogue, the Evanurus were deceitful and wicked beings. In Threnodies 8 verse 13, it reads that, "You have brought sin to heaven and doom upon all the world." It seems as if the Magisters began to unseal the Evanurus, and in doing so, have released some of the blight upon the world. Could this not be that very same doom? With a few changes to the timeline, it does seem plausible that Solus has the power and motive to be in line with the Maker's actions. 52. Dumat is the Maker. Dumat is the god of silence. Before anything, there was silence, as the chants state, and that was until the first word was spoken. Dumat may be silent for a reason, for if he speaks, he creates. As David Gator stated that the chantry was inspired by Christianity, could this also mirror the teaching of the Christian God's words being performative in nature? For example, saying, "Let there be light," and it came into existence. Dumat seems to be one of the most powerful of the old gods, since he was the most powerful archdemon, and the first blight was arguably the worst, lasting far longer than any other blight has. In Dragon Age Inquisition, during the quest, "Here lies the abyss," while they are in the Fade, Cole says, "They remember when they were so high, before it woke up," as he looks upon the Black City. It would make sense for the plural they to refer to the old gods and for it to refer to the supposed Maker. If this is true, Cole must know much about the true origins of the old gods and the Maker. Add to this that Andraste was born the same year as Dumat was slain during the first blight, suggests that maybe he was reborn in Andraste, as Kieran was with Irithemel. Level 6, Bottom of the Iceberg, 53. The first warden is one of the Magisters Sidereal. One theory suggests that the first warden is one of the Magisters, and the wardens as a whole were created by him or her. 1. According to Duncan, the joining has been passed down since the very first wardens. Who would have thought to imbibe the joining liquid, save for someone already blessed with the powers from the taint, well aware of the fatal pitfalls it could induce? Power was worth the cost to the Magisters, after all. 2. As proven in Legacy, the Wardens already know about the Magisters Sidereal and the original Darkspawn, but for some reason they never share this. Why? Is it because the known link would besmirch their name and lead others to question their intentions? 3. The only beings we ever see one of the Magisters possess are Wardens. The Wardens hide the existence of the Magisters, perhaps because they're still under control of the one who created them, or, at least, when they are corrupted. Perhaps one or more of them are body-hopping through the upper echelons of Warden leadership, and this is part of the cause of the Warden schism mentioned in Dragon Age Inquisition Epilogue. 54. Titans created the Darkspawn. The deep roads, the stone, the mountainous home of the dwarves and Illyrium deposits within all point to the very earth they reside in being the deceased forms of Titans. Shaper Sizibor claims that, quote, the Darkspawn rose up out of the earth, for it was in the deep roads they first appeared, creatures in our own likeness, armed and armored, but with no more intelligence than Tezpadam, bestial and savage. At first they were few, easily hunted and slain by our warriors, but in the recess of the deep roads they grew in numbers and in courage. The Darkspawn and archdemons seem to slumber underground in these dens of slain titans. Why? Perhaps the Titans' final act of vengeance was the creation of the Taint, Red Lyrium, and the Darkspawn, all in an attempt to destroy the world their enemies, their killers, loved so much. 55. The old gods serve as seals to the Black City, and it will open with their deaths. Solus claims that killing the last two archdemons would lead to something far worse than the Blight. So could this mean it unseals the Evanuris? Could the killing of these old gods, the archdemons, result in the breaking of the seal to the Black City and releasing what is thought to be an endless blight? Or perhaps, with the call of the archdemons gone, would something else fill the void? Some believe that the hive mind of the dwarves refers to the Titans and the stone, so would this new song infect the Darkspawn, allowing the Darkspawn to detect and thus venture deeper into the deep roads and corrupt the Titan? The Blights were a deflection paid for in mortal blood, a comparatively small price to pay as a distraction to prevent the true call of the Titans to be heard and the world-ending havoc it would bring. 56. The Black City is a blighted Titan. Assuming the Black City was really located at the top of Mount Belenas, knowing that various mountain ranges are believed to be the fallen forms of Titans, and moved into the Fade when the Evanuris were trapped, it makes sense. This shift also notably left behind Lake Calenhad. The Blight does not affect architecture, but only living beings. So how could the Blight impact the city if it were not made of organic matter, i.e. a Titan? The dwarf Dagna says after her research into the Fade has her vision of being mountain tall with other connections to the Titans, so the city coming from a part of the Titan would make sense here as well. And then there's the fact that the Black City actually looked like it's on a mountaintop, with the underside being ripped away from it and now suspended in the Fade. 57. Dragons and Titans are primordial beings vital to Thetis' continued existence. Yavanna states that, in destroying what it does not understand, mankind would destroy itself. The blood of dragons is the blood of the world. And Solus claims that killing the old gods can make things even worse. Add to this that Flemeth, who at one point was host to Mythal, tried to bring the dragons back. The existence of primordial beings thus has some inherent connection to the well-being of the world. It is through their corruption and death that blights and lead to the doom of all of Thetis and beyond. 58. Temple of Sacred Ashes was built over Mythal's temple. The final fight where Corypheus is killed takes place in the Temple of Sacred Ashes. Herein, Corypheus is standing, shouting at Dumont to grant him power. Why Dumont and why here? Simply put, Dumont is Mythal, and Andraste was most likely the old god baby born of Dumont's soul. That is why the Temple of Sacred Ashes is built upon a place sacred to Mythal, which was also used by the Tevinter as a place to call upon Dumont, as evidenced by the way Corypheus keeps praying to him. The Temple of Sacred Ashes was then built over this holy site of Mythal, perhaps at Solus or Shartan's influence, and that leads us to the current timeline. 59. Scaled Ones were elves who drank too much dragon blood. The Scaled Ones are most likely elves that ingested too much dragon blood, leaving them to become deformed. The codex entry on dragon cults reads as thus: members of a dragon cult live in the same lair as a high dragon. nurturing and protecting its defenseless young. In exchange, the High Dragon seems to permit those cultists to kill a small number of those young in order to feast on draconic blood. That blood is said to have a number of strange long-term effects, including bestowing greater strength and endurance, as well as an increased desire to kill. It may breed insanity as well. Navaran dragon hunters have said these cultists are incredibly powerful opponents. The changes in the cultists are a form of blood magic, surely, but how did the symbiotic relationship between the cult and the High Dragon form in the first place? How did the cultists know to drink the dragon's blood? How did the High Dragon convince them to care for its young, or know that they would? Add to this Cassandra's commentary on dragon blood. Dragon blood can change you in ways you will not expect. Dragon hunters were once revered in Navarra, and the Pentaghasts were the most famous. Many of my family became reavers, harnessing the power of dragon's blood against their quarry. But each one went terribly insane in the end. Eventually, it was forbidden. It was their doing, I understand. Greed drove them to use more and more. The blood deformed them, caused growth, scales, things of that nature. They became enraged by little things. In time, that rage swallowed them. They committed murders, killed entire families, unspeakable things. So, dragon blood can cause scale-like growths, deform the drinker, and cause violent madness over time. In the Descent DLC, we then learn through a codex entry about these scaled ones. The scaled ones. I can't remember who came up with the name, but it stuck. Drogue had been lighting a torch when one attacked, and we finally caught a glimpse of something other than shadows. In the flame's light, we saw a man's body like those of the Imperium humans, but covered in scales. It wore armor and even had a dagger hanging from its hip. Its jaws wrapped around Drogue's face and twisted. The crunch of his neck breaking seemed to echo down the deep roads. The torch fell from his hands, and we lashed out. The scaled ones had set up a camp at an intersection in the deep roads. In the center there was a golden altar fashioned in the shape of fire. A chill swept through me. On the tip of each flame hung the corpses of those we'd lost, including Father and Drogue. They'd been drained of blood, leaving only bone wrapped in gray skin. A robed, scaled one stood before the altar. Its voice was different from the others. Softer, almost feminine. It chanted and raised a basin of blood toward the altar. The other scaled ones bowed low. The robed scale one produced fire from its palm and mouth and ignited the blood. Given that Tevinter was known to be fascinated by dragons and was used to using or experimenting on slaves, could they not have forced their elven slaves to ingest more and more blood to figure out where the perfect line between madness and power lay? Level 7. Under the Iceberg. 60. Merrick is Morrigan's father. In the Stone Throne novel, Merrick and Loghain encounter and are brought to Flemeth in the Korcari Wilds. Merrick strikes a bargain with Flemeth, and she invites him into her hut, and he stays the night there. While what happens during this time is not described, Merrick does make some sort of promise of future help to Flemeth that he can't talk about. This has led many to presume that he slept with Flemeth during this time, resulting in Morrigan, making her the half-sister to Alistair. Assuming that Kieran is the result of Morrigan and Alistair per the Dark Ritual, it raises some uncomfortable facts. 61. Lyrium is found only in Thedas. It is interesting that the foreign dwarves were eager to get their hands on lyrium when they came to the ports, suggesting that perhaps they did not have any where they truly resided. Or does this merely show lyrium to be a truly finite resource that everyone will eventually cease to be able to use? The Templars, in particular, could suffer a steep blow should the lyrium supply ever fall. This could mean the Titans were only felled in Thedas, as lyrium is their blood. Or could this mean that Titans did indeed fall where these foreign dwarves were from, but the lyrium has long since been mined, perhaps since ancient times? 62. Andraste was a half-dwarf. Andraste was said to have a human mother, so she was most likely a half-dwarf if this theory is to be believed. David Gator said that crosses between dwarves and humans produce offspring that are a mix between the two, beings generally shorter and stockier than humans, but taller than dwarves. When Volta is blasted with pure lyrium, her entire personality shifts to one that is calm and resolute, and also seems able to perform magic. Now, dwarves are said to return themselves to the stone when they die, their entire beings, and lyrium is said to only infect living things. Given the dwarven tie to lyrium and their hive mind, could this be of all of their kin, i.e. their kin that has since died as well as the ones that continue to live? It stands to reason that their souls continue to return here. Thus, Volta absorbs some kind of soul from the lyrium that hits her, particularly a holy soul such as Andraste's. And Volta's tarot card, the Flaming Eye, Sunburst, the Blade of Mercy, and Shield that are seen are related to Andraste herself. All of these symbols are Andrastian. Why include them if not for foreshadowing or symbolism? Solus mentions that dwarves were once part of something so much bigger and more powerful than they are now. After defeating the Titan, could Volta have absorbed some part of Andraste, or whatever it was that inspired her? 63. Connor is Tegan's son. Various fans believe that Connor, the boy possessed by a demon in Origins, to be the son of Tegan and not Iman. Due to some dialogue in which the boy's mother, Isolde, seems incredibly jealous of Tegan being around other women, Tegan says to Hawk that, "You're very brave. Take this with my blessings. You remind me of someone I hold dear," though I never had the courage to say that to her. This has led many to believe that Tegan had an affair with Isolde, who became pregnant and continued to let Iman believe that he was the father. Because he never confessed his love to Isolde, she remained with Iman or otherwise married him. 64. Flemeth is still alive. It is revealed in Dragon Age 2 that, after Hawk gives the amulet to the Keeper and a Dalish ritual is performed upon it, Flemeth is reborn, as she stored a part of herself within it. It is later revealed that she did this as a form of insurance policy in case Morrigan managed to convince the Warden to kill her. What if you never killed Flemeth in Origins? Would this mean that there are two Flemeths in the world, or otherwise one soul waiting to be reborn should its master die? Say that Flemeth was killed in Origins. Could Flemeth not have repeated the process with another amulet, off-screen, as an additional backup plan, as it was proven before that she could be killed? 65. The veil doesn't envelop the entire world. The notion that the veil does not cover the entire world explains why people go mad when they sail to Amaranth, as the separation between the Fade and the mortal plane no longer exists. Thus, mortals are assaulted by the merging of the two. As such, does this mean that creatures can enter these areas from outside, or do they slip back into the Fade when they enter Thedas proper? 66. All magic users have elven blood. Drawing upon the idea that elves were spirits given form from the Fade, it has been shown that elves can interbreed with the other races. However, they don't show any features. Centuries of breeding could explain the genetic predisposition some families have with magic, as well as the presence of elves in all cultures. For example, the Teventers, known for their magic use, experimented heavily on their elven slaves, perhaps drawing from their blood their magical properties or initiating breeding experiments with them. As for the Qunari, the theory still stands that they were similarly bred with elves, like how Iron Bull believed them to be tampered with by dragon blood, among other things. Level 8. The Abyss. 67. Sulasan Temple is where Solus created the veil. The Selassen Temple is an ancient elven temple that is also referred to as the Temple of Pride. How odd that Solus, arguably a wisdom spirit whose opposite is pride, seems to know of this place. The temple door inscription can be translated to, "Arrogance became our end. Come not to a prideful place. Now let humility grant favor." Arrogance and greed was the end of the elven pantheon as they became more self-centered and power-hungry. Thus their pride, and this, the Temple of Pride, was their apex. An inscription which Solus can best translate reads, "Pride in our accomplishments and in our hearts." That same pride became, a word meaning corrupted or altered within him, he sought to claim, indecipherable. Cast from favor, and so he was bound. Hidden from mortal eyes, death lies within. Thus they were cast from mortal eyes and into the Fade, as Solus had now separated the two worlds, leaving them bound as Solus too was now bound to the role he had taken. 68. All Theodosian realms are interconnected. All of Thetis' realms, Orlais, Ferelden, Tevinter Empyrean, and others are all interconnected, from the mountainous ranges and underground caverns composed of fallen titans, as well as a Illyrium found only within its borders. Thetis is the epicenter of the Veil, the Titans, and the point from which Blights and the Evanuris may be freed. Similar to the ley lines of Kirkwall, many believe that Thetis is the most magical or powerful point on the planet. Under the surface, others believe that all realms are connected by deep roads tunnels, roads comprised of Titan veins that serve as a passage both for Darkspawn and mortals, where archdemons and Titan hearts sleep. 69. Mythal has a connection to multiple characters. Specifically, Mythal, a betrayed woman herself, seems to share connections with various betrayed women throughout the history of Thetis. Tyrda Brightaxe, Maragan Nan, Andraste, and Flemeth. I deeply apologize for that pronunciation. 70. The Hala were made from elves. Gillinan, whose experimentation and monster creations are well known, is known in Dalish lore as the mother of the Hala, and many believe that one of the many experiments she conducted on her elven slaves was to turn them into Hala. Additionally, a codex entry has an elven Hala tender state that they are our brothers and sisters, and are summarily regarded as companions, not pets or livestock. The Hala are incredibly important to Dalish life, pulling their Aravels, providing dairy, wool, leather, horns, and many other resources and skills that make their lives possible. One entry in Dalish lore also states that Andrul turned Gillinan into a Hala. Is that where the idea came from, or was it a nod of what she turned other elves into? Is the truth somewhere in between? In some in-game artwork of Hala, some appear to have a tear-like mark coming from their eye, as well as markings similar to Valisleen. Are they sentient at this point in time, cognizant of what they've been turned into? Inside another visage of a deer are what appear to be Valisleen wearing elven slaves. 71. Yavanna survived. As a daughter of Flemeth, Yavanna has shown quite a bit of insight about the world around her and, despite her seeming death, is most likely still alive. According to the lore, like Flemeth, she is incredibly long-lived, having been around since the Steel Age and caring for the Silent Grove into the Dragon Age timeline. She lets on that she knows of Flemeth's gift or possession by Mythal, and much more. Surely she knew of the amulet ritual that saved her mother. Could she not have saved herself, and what will she do with the information she currently holds? 72. Fenris is a Lyrium ghost like Liliana. Fenris is actually a Lyrium ghost, not just utilizing it as one of his talents in his Tevinter fugitive specialization. He is literally able to phase through solid objects, explaining his connection to the Fade, and can pass through then solidify within individuals, killing them. A Lyrium ghost is a spirit able to interact with the physical world, like Cole, but without quite being part of it. This is why Liliana disappears if she is not made divine, leaving behind a note that reads, "The lyrium sang thought into being. Now time is stale, and the melody is called elsewhere. Until I am needed, I am free." Again, because it is lyrium that gave her spirit form, and also explains how she was such a good and undetectable spy master. So why was Fenris bound to this world? Perhaps revenge was the key player. 73. Thetis is flat. Various fans have theorized that Thetis is, in fact, flat, unlike the spherical planets we know. This fact explains why there are no compasses, even by the technologically advanced Canary. The other moon is never seen, as it is on the other side. The moon that we do see is always full, suggesting that there is no rotation. Sure, a sextant is a tool that is used, but it should be able to work on a flat area, etc. Do people then fall off or go mad when they reach far enough out on one side? Or is the other side, the flip side, the fade, and the other the mortal world, the separation of the two reshaping the entire world? 74. Moon men exist. In the Codex entry, Mysteries of the Frostback Basin, moon men are mentioned various times. The writer claims that, "I speak of Orlace's attempts to rouse the Snake Kings of the Earth against Tevinter's alliance with the Moon Men. Did Moon Men have their Teventer allies keep the reptilian ones here, so they could interrogate them at their leisure?" From the description, the Teventers were in an alliance with these Moon Men, and had something to do with, most likely, the Scaled Ones. Is this a tie to the Teventer experiments on them, or something more? Could the Moon Men be spirits or demons that appeared from a rift in the sky, appearing like they came from the moon? 75. Dragons used to be more sentient. In particular, the great dragons mentioned by Yavanna were said to be more intelligent and different from high dragons, and their blood conveyed even greater power. However, as more became corrupt, with them turning into archdemons, what happens to their sentience? They seem like a little more than animals now, although archdemons are said to lead or otherwise organize the Darkspawn. Or are they merely puppets, conduits for a greater being? As noted by the architect bringing back the mother, a brood mother's consciousness, it is revealed that she had her memories blocked, essentially rendering her a simple beast. Are the archdemon dragons the same way, with a blight rendering them simple, brutish creatures that seek to kill, their prior memories and emotions now sealed away? 76. The blight is a bioweapon. The blight is a bioweapon or an otherwise ancient elven chemical weapon. The Grey Wardens basically practice a form of vaccination or immunization by taking the blight into themselves. Of course, it has its side effects and prolongs your restraint against it. What is a vaccine but a solution with a live virus or blight within it? The Evanurus discovered the key to immortality through the practice of ephemera, dreaming, detaching their spirit, fade, mana, and entering another body. Flemeth, or Mythal, says that this process must happen willingly. You need consent of the host and of the spirit. However, the blight is a virus whose secondary effect is that beings under it are subject to mind control, such as the Grey Wardens beginning to hear the call before eventually succumbing to it, or brood mothers becoming mindless husks. This means powerful spirits are able to enter their bodies at will. Add to this that an old god's soul seeks out the nearest being with a darkspawn taint. What it's really doing is seeking out the nearest willing host, whether that be a baby such as Kieran or another. Of course, a warden or darkspawn would welcome that soul into it because it hears the calling. When that closest being is a Grey Warden not yet fully progressing into a ghoul, technically it carries the taint, but it also mentally rejects the spirit. This occurrence would kill the warden, and the soul or spirit supposedly returns to the Fade because its attempt at possession had been unsuccessful. Thus, the Blight is probably a weapon devised by the Evanurus, who are going to unleash it upon the races, and especially the Titans, in an attempt to gain control over them and grant themselves immortality. There are a few interesting exceptions here, though. Corypheus and the Architect, and presumably the Evanurus. The two of the 7 original Magisters that entered the Golden City and seemed to be resistant to the mind control effects of the taint. Corypheus even controls his own dragon, seemingly similar to how Mythal binds you to her if you drink from the Well of Sorrows. Something about their strength gives them power over the Blight, perhaps having something to do with what happened when they entered the Fade physically. In essence, the Evanurus created a virus which enables them to bind physical beings to their will, including dragons and titans. This is the very hill Mythal opposed her fellows on and was killed for, the very thing Fen'Harel feared and sealed the Evanurus away for in an attempt to stop them all those years ago. 77. The devs are the maker. A more meta theory is that the developers are the maker. They have said that, generally speaking, they will never reveal the true nature of the maker, but as the true creators of the franchise and the world, its characters and its lore, they are the ones that oversee all decisions in universe, also taking away the illusion of choice. 78. Evanurus stole power from great dragons. From lore and anecdotes, it appears as if all of the powerful ancient elves, the Evanurus, were dreamers, and the drinking of great dragon blood granted incredible powers, such as the power of a dream, raising these powers to the highest level imaginable. Additionally, many are depicted as being humanoid in shape, but most notably have dragon-like horns or other features, and Mythal was known to turn into a dragon. Drinking normal dragon blood, as with the scaled ones, can grant the drinker power and draconic features, not to mention the blood can turn one aggressive and violent, perhaps akin to the description of the Evanurus when they killed Mythal. This dragon blood, combined with the Titan's blood lyrium and blood magic, led to disastrous effects on their bodies and psyches. 79. All Evanurus went bald. In the mosaic depictions of all of the Evanurus, and also when considering Solus, all of them appear or are bald. Why? Was it more symbolic in nature, an act or status symbol meant to distinguish them? Or did this occur due to drinking great dragon blood, losing a more mammalian feature such as hair? One of the final transformations seen as the blood began to warp their minds. 80. Mythal is behind everything that happened since the creation of the Veil. Many believe Mythal, especially due to her actions possessing Flemeth, suggests that all of the events of the games, her interactions with the main characters, Kiran, and the like, are all done in an attempt to release the Evanurus from their prison, despite the considerable cost that would entail, in order to seek her vengeance on those that betrayed her. Thus, it was Mythal, whom Solus calls the best of the Evanurus, who seeks to destroy the world all for her own sense of justice, regardless of those that get in the way. 81. Fiona is not Alistair's mother. In the Calling novel, the elf, Fiona, and Merrick developed a relationship in the Deep Roads, with the result being Alistair. However, despite being confirmed by David Gator, there are those that believe she is not his mother. Fans have latched onto the fact that the World of Thedas Volume 1 states that Alistair was born in 910 Dragon, while the events of the Calling take place in 914 Dragon. While it could be a simple error, some have made the supposition that Fiona appeared with another infant or child, one that was planned to one day be a candidate for the crown, and had no blood relation to the throne, but for what purpose, no one knows. 82. The Titans are waking up. From the Descent DLC, we learn that the Titan in the erased histories of the dwarves was the cause of the earthquakes. It was discovered again and was causing earthquakes because the breach woke it up, and it started flailing about, looking for a connection to one of its children. In other words, a dwarf that hadn't been tainted by whatever the Chat-Britol have been doing to themselves with lyrium while the Titan slept. It found its child in Volta, the only unaltered dwarf to get close to it in centuries, and summarily calmed down. Thus, with the breach, at least one Titan, and its true hive mind capabilities, has begun to awaken, demonstrating its ability to connect to its children. If the dwarves fall to the will of a fully awoken Titan, what does that mean for the rest of Thedas? And that concludes part 2. If you have any theories of your own or disagree with any herein, please share it below. Next time we'll be looking into the Pokemon Legends Arceus Iceberg and, as per the current vote, a generation-specific Pokemon Iceberg. Until next time, thanks.